If you're trying to quit drinking or to cut back, odds are at some point you have reached for non-alcoholic beer or an alcohol-free wine. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe you were hoping you could trick your brain into thinking that you're having alcohol and scratch the booze craving without getting a hangover. But are non-alcoholic drinks safe to have, or are you just keeping yourself hooked? This question comes up in almost every conversation I have with clients and listeners. Is it okay to drink non-alcoholic beer, or am I just perpetuating the dependence? This is what we're talking about on today's episode. Why I think non-alcoholic drinks are not just okay, but genuinely helpful, especially in the beginning. And we will also talk about how to choose them and what to watch out for. You're listening to How to Drink Less, and I'm your host, Adriana Cloud. Whether your goal is to cut back, to take a break, or quit drinking for good, this podcast will help you to stop drinking on autopilot, learn how to manage cravings, and feel fully in control around alcohol. It's easier than you think. Listen on to find out how. Hi everyone, welcome back. I want to answer a question today that comes up constantly in different forms. Are non-alcoholic drinks okay? Is it fine to reach for an alcohol-free drink, or am I just tricking myself and still feeding the same habit, just with the alcohol taken out? I have strong feelings about this. TLDR, I think NA drinks are one of the most useful tools available to you in sobriety, especially early on. Because here's the thing I want you to understand. Drinking is rarely about the liquid itself. More often than not, it's about the ritual. The pleasure of making a cocktail at the end of the day and pouring it in a special glass. The sound of the beer can opening when you sit down to watch TV. The feeling of holding something in your hand at a party. The sense of, I'm allowed to relax now, that comes with pouring a glass of wine. Once you separate the ritual from the liquid, you realize something important. You can keep that ritual even when you remove the alcohol. If you were drinking because you wanted to enjoy the taste of a special drink and it felt like a treat, you can still have a special non-alcoholic drink. If your ritual was sharing a cocktail with your partner before dinner, you can still share that moment of connection even when you're not consuming alcohol. The liquid doesn't have to be alcoholic for the connection to be real. Now, this is where people ask me, but if I do this, am I just perpetuating the dependence on a drink, even if it's a non-alcoholic one? Or some people will tell me that reaching for an alcohol-free beer is just cheating, that you're still using a substance just with a loophole, like you're getting away on a technicality, but you're still doing something problematic. And here's why I don't believe any of that. When you drink alcohol, your brain gets a huge hit of dopamine, and that hit reinforces the craving. Our brains are wired to crave experiences that feel good because, from an evolutionary standpoint, those experiences that feel good are the ones that keep us alive, like eating and procreating. So, when you drink alcohol and get that unnaturally high hit of dopamine, your brain thinks, oh, that felt really good. It must be important for survival, so let's do it again. And every time you drink alcohol, you're reinforcing that loop. I want it, I get it, I want it again. That's how the dependence on alcohol develops in the first place. But with a non-alcoholic drink, that chemical loop simply isn't happening in the same way. There is no significant dopamine spike because there's no meaningful amount of alcohol in alcohol-free drinks. So instead of reinforcing the pattern of craving reward, more cravings, you're actually interrupting it. Every time you choose the ritual without the alcohol, you're weakening the old association between the situation and the drink. You're not restarting the cycle, you're actually breaking it. So, no, in most cases, using a non-alcoholic drink is not just perpetuating the dependence. On the contrary, it lets you keep the parts of the ritual that were harmless, and it allows you to change the ones that led to unwanted consequences. Some people also get it in their heads that they shouldn't need an alcohol-free drink, that somehow it's weakness to look for a substitute for alcohol. Says who? I don't think it's a weakness. It's a tool. If the tool helps you, use it. Bonus points if it's delicious and you happen to enjoy it. You don't have to make sobriety harder than it already is. Eventually, you might decide that you don't need replacements anymore. These days, 5.5 years sober, I rarely have a mocktail or non-alcoholic beer. Most of the time, I drink water or maybe sometimes a ginger beer or tea. But when I was first starting out as a non-drinker, I definitely had my fair share of NA beers and kombuchas and the like. People also worry about the fact that some non-alcoholic beers and wines still have 0.5% alcohol. Someone recently asked me, if I have several 0.5% beers in an evening, doesn't that add up to basically drinking a regular beer? I want to clear this up because the math genuinely doesn't work that way. A standard beer is usually around 5% ABV, alcohol by volume, and a 330 milliliter bottle contains roughly 13 grams of alcohol. A 0.5% non-alcoholic beer in that same size bottle has maybe 1 to 1.5 grams of alcohol. That means you would need to drink somewhere between 8 and 12 non-alcoholic beers to get anywhere close to the alcohol in one regular beer. You would feel extremely full and probably a little bit sick long before you got anywhere near that. And your body is metabolizing the alcohol in real time even while you're still drinking. So even if you have several non-alcoholic drinks, the alcohol from them doesn't really accumulate into any meaningful amount. And here's something that tends to surprise most people. Plenty of everyday foods contain more trace alcohol than a 0.5% beer does. A very ripe banana can sit around 0.4 to 0.5 ABV. Bread, especially things like sourdough and brioche, which ferment longer, those can range from 0.3 up to over 1% ABV, which is actually higher than most non-alcoholic beers. Orange juice, apple juice, even some grape juice, they all carry small amounts of alcohol, generally under 0.5%, sometimes a bit higher the longer they sit. Soy sauce and vinegar also have some percentage of alcohol. Soy sauce especially is one of the highest. It has 1.5 to 2% ABV from its own fermentation process. But nobody worries about a child getting tipsy off a banana or a glass of orange juice, and for good reason. These trace amounts are processed by your body essentially in real time, faster than you could ever consume them in any quantity that would matter. So, if a 0.5% non-alcoholic beer is your worry, it's genuinely no different from the alcohol that's already sitting in your fruit bowl or in your bread basket. Now, let's talk about NA drinks as replacements. When you start exploring alcohol-free options, you're never going to find an exact replacement for whatever your favorite alcoholic drink used to be. If you're hoping to find an alcohol-free version that tastes exactly like the Pinot Noir that you used to love, it's not going to happen. That's true even though non-alcoholic drinks have come a long way. Some NA beers now have genuinely improved. Sparkling wine and white wine alternatives are pretty decent these days, but red wine alternatives, if you ask me, are still not great. But with all the options out there, you will have to try a few to find what actually works for you. But my suggestion is go in knowing that the goal is not to find a perfect match for what you used to drink. The goal is to find something that roughly serves the same purpose as alcohol did. So ask yourself, what am I actually looking for? This is a great question because non-alcoholic drinks isn't even one real category. It depends on what you're trying to get out of the drink. Are you looking for a treat? Something that feels fancy or celebratory? You can absolutely create that with a non-alcoholic drink. Find an interesting soda, make yourself a proper mocktail, or just pour an iced tea into your nicest glass and add a little garnish. Use the good stemware. The glass and the ritual around it can make a drink feel elevated and special rather than like a consolation prize. Even if you're just having sparkling water, Pour it in a wine glass and see how that feels different. Or are you looking for something that pairs well with your food? That's a completely different question and a fun one to explore. Do you want something tart, sweet, a little bitter, more citrusy, something hot, something cold, something with bubbles? Once you're asking that question instead of, what's the non alcoholic version of wine? Now you've got a lot more to work with. Or maybe you're drinking because alcohol used to give you permission to stop working and to switch off for the day. That's worth recognizing on its own because it means the thing you're actually looking for isn't a taste, it's a signal. It's a cue to your brain that says, we're done, it's time to rest now. Once you can see that clearly, you get to go looking for a different cue entirely, and it doesn't even have to involve a drink at all. I had a client who used to drink red wine with pizza every time without fail, and when we talked about what she might drink instead, her first instinct was to look for non-alcoholic red wine. But when we dug a little deeper, she realized it wasn't really the wine flavor itself. It was a certain warmth that she was getting from it. So instead, she went for hot tea. I think it was a raspberry tea because it was red and it gave her that same warmth. She never would have found that tea if she had stayed focused on finding wine but without the alcohol. She had to go one layer deeper to what the wine was actually providing in order to find something that worked. That's really the whole method. Don't look for the exact drink you used to have, but just with the alcohol removed. Ask what the drink was doing for you and go looking for that instead. And thankfully, the world of non-alcoholic drinks keeps getting better and bigger every day. There's so many different kinds of drinks now, not just alcohol-free wine, beer, and spirit substitutes. There's all kinds of kombucha, there's vinegar-based drinks called shrubs, there are all kinds of adult sodas with genuinely interesting flavors. And just a quick note on kombucha here, because it is fermented, some batches can carry a small amount of natural alcohol, generally still under the 0.5% mark, but if you're being extra careful around trace amounts of alcohol, it's worth checking the label on all kombuchas. And what I'm noticing is that more bars, pubs, and restaurants are expanding their non-alcoholic offerings. Here in the UK, it's becoming very common to see a non-alcoholic beer on tap in pubs, which matters a lot in a culture where a pint of beer is such a central part of going to the pub. It helps people feel like they're still part of the scene, fitting in with the group, even with a non-alcoholic pint in hand. I love seeing that because it makes non-drinkers feel included rather than like an afterthought. One of my best friends owns a restaurant in California. If you're ever in the San Diego area, go to All Mine in Oceanside and say hi to Roxana and tell her that I sent you. And she has an extensive non-alcoholic drinks menu year-round. And she tells me constantly how much people appreciate it and how grateful they are to have options beyond just orange juice and maybe Heineken Zero. People want to celebrate and to connect and to enjoy a night out without alcohol, and they want it to feel intentional and thought out and special, the way that a wine list is intentional and thought out and special. Now, there's another benefit to non-alcoholic drinks that doesn't get talked about enough, especially early on. They can act as a kind of shield. If you're out with people who are drinking, having a drink already in your hand, one that looks like just like everyone else's, means that people generally aren't going to be pushing any drinks on you, and you're not going to be fielding a dozen questions about why you're not drinking. I have a client right now who's been socializing a lot lately, and she told me that having a non-alcoholic sparkling wine in a flute makes her feel really good because from the outside, it just looks like she's having a glass of Prosecco. No one can tell she's not drinking, so she gets to feel like she's fitting in without having to explain herself or draw attention to the fact that she is taking a break. And I don't think that's dishonest. That's just giving yourself room to build confidence in social situations without the whole room weighing in on your choices and making you feel self-conscious. I do want to add an important caveat here because non-alcoholic drinks aren't automatically neutral for everyone, and I don't want to gloss over that. For some people, the taste, smell, or even just the ritual of pouring something that looks and tastes like beer or wine can activate a craving for the real thing. This is not a character flaw or a sign that you're not trying hard enough or that you're too weak. It's actually a known phenomenon called cue reactivity. Your brain has built strong associations between certain sensory experiences and the reward that used to follow those experiences. And I'm talking about things like the specific bitterness of a beer, or the smell of red wine, or even the sound of a cap twisting off the bottle. For some people, that association is strong enough that the sensory cue alone, even without the real alcohol behind it, is enough to light up a craving or stir up a wave of memories that romanticize the drinking rather than helping you to move away from it. The best advice I can give you here is to pay attention to your own reaction and don't compare yourself to other people. If you try a non-alcoholic drink and you notice that it's stirring up cravings or making you miss drinking, that's useful information, not a failure. In that case, you might want to back off that particular NA drink and give yourself time. The good news is, this is exactly why it's worth having options that don't mimic alcohol at all. If beer or wine substitutes are triggering for you, you can instead choose the drinks that don't try to replicate that sensory experience. So, kombuchas, a good sparkling water with bitters, any interesting soda, a nice cup of tea, things like that. And I want to add another quick caveat here. Non-alcoholic drinks are never going to create the same dependence that alcohol can create because there's no meaningful alcohol there to hook your brain's dopamine system in the same way. But there's a different pattern that's worth watching out for. If you notice you're drinking non-alcoholic beers back to back, chasing some kind of buzz that never comes, that's a different conversation we can have. A couple of my clients have mentioned exactly this. One told me that when she first cut out alcohol, she was drinking a few non-alcoholic beers every night. But the buzz she was trying to get never came, and she realized that she was just taking in a lot of liquid and the associated calories without getting much satisfaction from the second or the third or the fourth beer. And once she recognized that, the craving to keep drinking faded on its own. And I've heard similar stories from other clients too, who find that when they're drinking non-alcoholic drinks, one or two tend to be enough. The thing to actually watch out for is different. If you notice you feel like you need your non-alcoholic Prosecco so that people stop asking you questions, or if it's the only way that you can let yourself rest is to have a non-alcoholic drink, that's worth getting curious about. Ask yourself, what am I hoping this drink would give me right now? Do I like my reasons for drinking this? As long as you're staying present and curious, you will always be able to tell the difference between a helpful tool and a new thing that you're becoming dependent on. But overall, my personal view is that non-alcoholic drinks are great, especially while you're first learning how to be a non-drinker in a world that normalizes and glorifies alcohol. Lean on those tools, lean on those drinks. They can genuinely help you. That's it for today, my friends. If you've been avoiding non-alcoholic drinks because you were worried that you would be cheating at sobriety, I hope this episode puts that worry to rest. Use the tools that help you. That's not a weakness or a failing. That's just a good strategy and setting yourself up for success. And if you are looking for support with quitting drinking and building a life that doesn't revolve around alcohol, I would love to work with you. Book a free consultation through the link in the show notes, and let's talk. Let's talk about what's keeping you stuck, and let's talk about how you can break free. Take good care, my friends, and I'll talk to you next week.